At this point in the program, we have an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. So anyone from the audience that would like to go to the microphone and ask a question? Barry.
They said they're all on.
They're not.
It's on.
They said I'm done. Oh, there you go.
Put it back a little.
I just wanted to say that this polluter pays idea is supporting activism in novel ways. In Brazil, the conference in Campinas brought the victims groups in Brazil together from all over the country. These people had never had an opportunity to get together and meet each other until last October. So this was an extraordinary thing that once they were able to make those kinds of personal connections, have a beer together in the evening and meet at the conference, then they could continue without having constant personal communications. But that was a valuable thing to bring these people together. And here you're hearing about the government in Spokane, Washington, doing a polluter pays collection from responsible industries and using some of the money to support ADAO. So I think this is very interesting to see that this polluter pays idea is supporting activism and probably buying a great deal of prevention for not very much money.
Another question from the audience?
Barry, do you know where this asbestos yarn is intended to end up in the U.S.? Is there any indication where it's going?
I have no idea, but that's an awful lot of asbestos yarn that we're importing from Mexico, and the customs records would show the identity of the exporter and the identity of the importer, and the EPA could get access to that information. It's not publicly available, but the EPA could get that information and then go and visit the place that's using it and find out how it's being used, what kinds of occupational and environmental hazards are created, and whether it's being used in consumer products. These are the things that we've asked them to do.
Thank you.
Another question from anyone? So I have a question for Carmen Lima. One of your slides indicated in Europe this proposal for the eradication of asbestos by 2032. What's the actual definition of eradication? How is that different from remediation or other terms?
No. Eradication, for us, it means that's elimination. The removal of all the asbestos in all the equipments and all the materials. But it is a proposal, so it is not a law yet. Okay. But it's an important mark.
Any other questions? Do any of the panelists have questions for each other? Do any of the panelists have something else they'd like to say that they didn't get a chance to say?
The Australians, when they use the term eradication, means taking it out of the buildings, not just covering it up or managing it in place. And that is the long-term solution, because as long as it's there, there's the possibility that people are going to do dangerous or stupid things and just not know any better.
As well, distinguish the use of asbestos. Eradication for us in Latin languages means to finish, to extinguish it.
To extinguish it.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to. Yes.
Because in France, we have to check when there is asbestos-containing material in the buildings. We have to check if there is a degradation of the material. If there is no degradation, we don't have to do anything, because abatement is sometimes very productive of dust. And eradication for us, it seems to me, means no use, no importation, no exportation, but we don't have asbestos. So no importation and no use in any product.
So, but in this proposal, I participate in the team, and it wasn't the eradication for us to the proposal. It was to eliminate, not to. It was to remove the asbestos from, because if the asbestos steals in materials, it will still have a problem. The European countries will still have a problem.
It just manages it, but it delays the problem for many years. Yes.
I think that the eradication is not perhaps a perfect term, but in Australia it is the term in the legislation, so it is the term that is used. I believe that what we can aim at is eliminating exposure, and that is a feasible thing. We cannot eradicate asbestos because it's a natural material. We can't easily destroy. We certainly don't have methods to destroy all the asbestos that's in the world. So I think that, without speaking for the Australian agency, my understanding from talking to them is that their interpretation is eliminating human exposure to asbestos, and predominantly that's airborne exposure. And that is a feasible, I believe, goal, probably ultimately achievable.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Improper, but eradication for us it means more a political decision, as to eradicate the labor, the child labor, eradicate the slave work. Is the sense, it's a political term to see. It's a complete actions, a set of complete actions to, of course, eliminate. We know that we have Australia, like in Brazil and South Africa, we have the asbestos miners, even they are closed, not yet in Brazil, but we will face the problem with asbestos forever, okay? No program will eliminate totally the problem, the environmental problem, but the eradication in the sense, in the political sense, that we don't want to live with asbestos. We don't allow asbestos in our lives. Even some of situations are not feasible, as you mentioned. Yeah? It's more a political decision than technical.
Like to emphasize that as a consequence of the polluter pays principle, the polluter must pay for the removal or the eradication of asbestos of these buildings, for example. And even if it's not proved that that material was produced by some company, a specific company, you can, for example, and Fernanda is working on some kind of thesis on that. You can, for example, look at the market share of the companies in a period or in a year, or and you can define a proportion each company will pay for removing or eliminating asbestos of the buildings, for example. And it is a consequence, a direct consequence of the polluter pays principle.
Carmen?
Eradication, because it's a political term. This proposal that Economic and Social European proposes proposes to the European countries that they have to create plans to remove asbestos, and they have to know how much it will cost us. So the European Council alerts for this problem and alerts for the priority, and say to United European that we have to know how much will cost to remove asbestos from the buildings and to remove asbestos from the schools and from the industries. So it's to eliminate the asbestos from the contact of the people. But we know that it is a too ambitious goal, because 2032 is tomorrow. And for example, in Portugal, we have banned asbestos because we have an obligation to ban asbestos because we are a country from Europe. But we have started to do the first steps to remove asbestos. We have no regulation to remove, so we will have a lot of work to do. It will be a very ambitious goal to us. We know that. But the countries must know what will cost to remove and to eliminate the asbestos from the buildings and to prevent the exposure of people. It's the only solution.
And the social cost is to keep the asbestos, to maintain the asbestos, because certain situations to remove is not in that moment the correct situation. Technical, social, political, economic, we know this, especially in our countries where we have all our other priorities. But I would like to remember this. In São Paulo State, we approve the reverse logistic. Yes, the producers will have to, when there is a remotion, elimination, they have to pay this. In our state, we have already approved this, and we are campaigning to have this, the logistic, the reversal logistic for the whole country, number one. The second point to stress here is we are going to a hearing next May in our Senate to try to approve the federal law. That is not easy because the asbestos lobby is still in charge, working very hard to halt these actions, but we continue looking for these decisions, these political decisions to ban asbestos when it's possible, yes, political, economic, socially, but working other ways to minimize the problem.
Great. Thank you. I'd like everyone to put their hands together for our speakers.